Okay, before I move on to Buddhism, does anyone want to share with me what you found enticing or appealing about this Hindu perspective? And once again, it's an umbrella category for a lot of different things, a lot of different religions within the Vedic tradition or the Axle Age. Were there things you could see? I mean, there's over 1 billion Hindus in the world. That's quite impressive. It's the third largest religion in the world. But curiously, it's found almost exclusively in India, or people who have immigrated from India to other places. And I explained some of that in the Hinduism video. Don't you like the idea that you're God? I mean, that's kind of appealing. I also like the idea that the more you realize your God consciousness, the more free you become. Now, as long as you think there's something external to you, whether it's your parents, your teacher, your government, your church, your religion, your priest, a God, you're going to have to be beholden to them and their injunctions, their rules, them telling you how to live. But do you see, once you realize that you are it, you get to make the rules. Your desires become synonymous with virtue and righteousness, and the things you dislike or avoid become evil or sin. And that's kind of neat. One of my students says it's a lot of responsibility. And that's the flip side, of course, is if you indeed are God, you become the end-all, be-all. But if you begin to remember, I mean, what responsibility? The student said it's a lot of responsibility, but you're just kind of doing your thing. You're being God. And when you realize, let's take the pandemic we're going through right now, for example. When you realize that the virus and the animals it came from and the people it's infecting, they're all part of the same thing, then it really doesn't make sense to talk about infections and deaths and survival rates, because there's only one thing going on, and the animals, the virus, and the people are all part of that oneness. I mean, that could go down as simple as a killing or a murder. Once you begin to realize that the killer and the killed are the same person, it kind of changes your perspective on things. Holy cow, I got a big response here. Let me see if I can pull this up. Okay, one of my students says, I recently watched this video because I was curious about the topic of language. I wanted to share this because your statement regarding the numerous names there might be for God made me think. It's regarding language. After reading this, I read the following passage. All people on earth, this is from the passage, all people on the earth had one language and the same words. When they traveled east, they found a valley in the land of Shinar and settled there. They said to each other, come, let us make bricks and bake them hard. They used bricks for stones and asphalt for mortar. They said, come, let us. And I'm going to skip down a little. And the Lord came down and he said, there is now one people, and they all have one language. And this is what they've begun to do. And now all that they plan to do will be possible for them. That's a curious thought, right? I don't know if that ever struck you reading the Tower of Babel account in the Old Testament, but there's some interesting figures of speech. I think they're figures of speech. For one, it says, let us go down and see what man is up to. For one thing, that implies that God wasn't aware, like he had to physically come down onto the earth to do reconnaissance on what humans are doing. So I would take that as a figure of speech. Obviously, God knew what they were doing. But the other curious thing in the passage, it says, the people are of one speech and one mind, one intention. And in that context, in that energy, in that movement, in that intentionality, nothing will be withheld from them. And part of God's response, of course, was to confuse the languages which scattered the people. And part of the dispersion was because of the rebellion. this idea that they were going to build their own tower up to God. It wasn't going to be about God telling them what to do, but they were going to be in charge of their own destiny. All right, thanks for sharing that. Any other thoughts or comments on Hinduism? I think the hardest part for me would be this idea of it's all kind of on you. There is no concept of grace or mercy. This isn't, in fact, that's one of the most offensive things to a Hindu, this idea of Christians claiming that someone else paid their karmic debt for them. And Hindus would see Christians as simply being self-deceived. This idea that, oh, Jesus paid my ticket, I'm on the grace train, I get to be reconciled to the Father. The Hindu would say, no, karmic debt has to be paid. And you're either going to pay it in this life or you're going to pay it in the next life. No one gets to proceed or develop or return to godhood without going through that process, without fulfilling their dharma and paying off their karma. I saw a fun bumper sticker years ago. It said, my karma just ran over your dogma, it was a nice jab at Eastern religions being more open and tolerant and inclusive than the Western religions who were so dogmatic and legalistic and our way or the hell way. But you could add another bumper sticker that says, grace trumps karma every time, or mercy over karma every time. And that's something that is not available in Hinduism. Although in certain sects of, like the Hare Krishna sect, Krishna, if you remember, I believe was he the seventh or eighth avatar of Vishnu? And Krishna is very much like a Christ-type character in the West, where through devotion to him, he brings you into a better reincarnation. But he's still not going to bring you off the wheel entirely as long as you see Krishna as being distinct from you. But if you have Krishna consciousness, that God consciousness, well, then you're kind of in another category. This idea, though, you are responsible for your own enlightenment. It's through your knowledge, it's through your study, it's through your self-discipline, it's through you not letting the distractions of this world to overcome you, and through your own effort and your deconstruction, you break through to godhood. Or more accurately, you realize who you already are but had forgotten. But that's on you. That isn't an act of grace. That's not God illuminating your soul. That's not you getting revelation. That is you applying, and not just an intellectual head knowledge that you are one with God, but an existential understanding that you are it. And yeah. Alrighty. I'm going to go ahead and start our section on Buddhism then.